Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and we are once again joined by Sam.
Hello.
Welcome back again.
Today we are discussing Planet of Giants. It is the first story of the second season of Doctor Who in 1964. This is currently the oldest episode that we've reviewed. Just double checking. Yes, it in fact is.
Yes.
It is an episode that you told us about initially when you, Sam, were doing your... A while back you were watching Doctor Who from the beginning.
I started from the beginning. I didn't get super far before I kind of lost steam. I remember I got up to Dalek Master Plan and saw it was like 12 episodes long, and I was like, I don't have the energy to deal with that right now, and I just never went back to it.
Oh, it doesn't. The video of it doesn't even exist anymore. So you'd have to.
Oh yeah, no, it was like
get the audio
was
story for it.
Oh wow, it's 12 episodes long, and also it's a reconstituted visuals. Not in the mood for this right now. And then that was, I want to say, over a year ago. I've still got them saved though, so I can go back at some point.
Maybe this will re-spark that.
No, I'm too deep in the Star Trek minds right now.
Yeah,
that's true. But you did initially tell us that this story, when you first saw it, it did kind of like reinvigorate what was otherwise kind of a slog at the start of this rewatch, I guess.
A little bit, yeah. Because
like, go into that.
It's not I think the vibe I got from this when I was watching it was, I was like, obviously the introduction of the Daleks was like, this is interesting because it's the Daleks, even though it's 6 episodes long and it really should only be 4. So even parts of that were a bit of a slog, and like there were I don't remember exactly the progression of events. I don't remember. Is the Romans before or after this one? Fitz, you probably know.
The Romans is after this one.
After, okay, because I remember having fun with the Romans too. Just because, like, oh yeah, it is because it's after Barbara leaves. Is the Romans? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah, just quickly, I just remember really finding that one funny because there was the juxtaposition of like Ian and Barbara have been like sold into slave labor, and the Doctor is kung fu fighting guys and running around going and it was just very funny to watch the like cutting between those two plot lines. I'm pretty sure that episode resolves with Ian and Barbara like escaping from slavery, getting back to the TARDIS, and the Doctor's like, "So did you guys have fun on your ship?" And they're like, "No, Doctor, we did not." Like, oh well, on to the next adventure.
I think
but yeah,
so before this one is the Reign of Terror, based on something the Doctor.
It is, yeah. Reign of Terror is the last story of the first season. How would you describe the first season? Yeah.
Is it missing? Is that a missing story? I feel like...
I don't know.
Maybe.
But in general, Sam, how would you describe the first season of Doctor Who compared to the second?
I mean, well, I think particularly starting with this, the second season was a lot more interesting just because it decided to get a bit weirder with it. Like a lot of the slog of the first season was like I don't want to say that like pure historical stories are boring, but those ones were, because it's like, oh yeah, we're just fucking dealing with some Aztec guys for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And then we'll leave.
Yeah.
What's the I can't even fucking remember it, but like there's the one where they land on a spaceship and there's like humans and also those aliens, and they have I don't even remember most of the details of it, but I just remember I'm pretty sure I even showed you that moment, Cuff, when you came over to record a Xenoblade one time. It was just like the next time on, stinger for the end of the episode was just like this really shitty looking alien mask. Just like,
do you mean the Sensorites?
The Sensorites, yes, that's it.
Yeah,
that one.
Is that
was
the
just
one with? So
like
yeah, go
just
ahead.
like the end of the first episode is just like a Sensorai just like sort of slowly rises up in a window, and everyone's like,
Yeah.
oh, oh, boom, boom.
Here's the thing. I remember, and this is probably just because I was younger. I remember watching that specific scene as a kid, and I actually loved it because it was so weird and
Yeah,
so
well, like I
almost
say,
surreal in a way. But
season two just like at least the episodes that were more memorable just started getting weird with it.
oh yeah, no, they I think they had a better
And
understanding of what this show was, so that they could afford to play around with it
and
a bit. We
like
see this with the chase because that story's fucking
yeah,
nuts.
well, I kind of think of this episode as like a proto version of the chase in some ways.
Yeah, I can see
And
that.
like it's not nearly as like wacky or crazy,
Mm,
but like there's a bunch of just like goofy shit that happens.
yeah,
And like this is more entertaining
yeah,
because weird goofy shit is happening.
yeah.
Well, we've
It's
reviewed
mm,
3 First Doctor stories for this podcast, including
Mm.
this one. They're all from season 2.
yeah,
Yeah.
Planet of Giants, The Chase, and The Time Meddler.
yeah.
One day we'll stray from the path and look at something before or after, but for now, this is what we've chosen to do. Now I'm
Yes, I did.
curious. What? Oh yeah. Going into something like Planet of Giants, you're not expecting something like this.
No, you're
You're
expecting
expecting
the
like
Twilight Zone episode, all the little people. I think it's called.
yeah, or at the very least, you're expecting
Mm.
like some like green screen / force perspective things to create
Yeah.
like effectively like Greek Cyclops like monsters or something like that
Yeah.
for the TARDIS crew to run away from.
Yeah.
What we instead get is something that the BBC at the time didn't have a lot of faith in.
Yeah, we got Honey, I Shrunk the Ship is what we got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember like first time I started watching old Doctor Who when they were on ABC every night.
Hmm.
This is one of the ones I remembered the most.
Hmm.
Purely because I was like, hey, this is an interesting concept. Some space got in because they left the door open and now everyone's tiny.
Hmm.
That's all the explanation I need, and now we're going to see some shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that the BBC didn't have a lot of faith in this story. It was originally going to be the first story of the first season. This was originally what
Also,
was
like,
going to.
instead of going to cavemen, they were going to do this.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
But it was rejected by Sidney Newman due to its technical complexity and lack of character development.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Hmm.
It was then going to be like where Marco Polo ended up being in the first season, but it was dropped due to scripting difficulties. It was going to be 4 parts long, but then they split episodes 3 and 4 into like one episode of episode 3, which, looking back, knowing it, is very evident. It was going to be 4 parts, but they wanted to reduce it to 3 because they thought it was an unsatisfactory opening to the show's second season, and they wanted to open the season with the Dalek invasion of Earth to carry on the Dalek hype train.
I mean, yeah, that's
And
probably the smarter thing
Dalek
to
invasion.
do. But
I'm pretty sure that is literally the next story.
it is
I think so,
the
yeah.
next story. They couldn't move it around because of Susan's involvement in this episode and the fact that she'd be leaving at the end of the next. So right from the off, you have a story that it seemed like no one wanted to go to air at the time. And like, I don't know, like there are elements of this story that I'm like, I kind of see where they're coming from, because one of the big complaints about this story at the time was the script primarily.
Yeah, this is one of the most low stakes episodes of Doctor Who ever.
And
Which
really,
feels weird because the stakes are fucking poisoning the drinking water of the entire country, but like
Yeah.
for a show like Doctor Who,
that's surprisingly small.
that's so mundane.
Yeah,
But it's also got
Like who gives
really.
a shit?
But also in the third episode, they're like, "Oh, if we don't get back to the TARDIS in time, Barbara's going to fucking die," which
Yeah,
are also pretty.
like
big stakes, but it really
there's
doesn't
more
feel
like
that way.
personal and character stakes, but in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah.
like the big problem that the
Yeah.
team needs to solve, it's like nothing.
yeah.
Well,
Compared to
even then, like,
the time disruptor in
It almost solves itself. They
yeah,
do so little to actually fix the problem.
it feels. I was surprised how well the characters are integrated into the plot in that way, that they're the ones to turn whatever it is, like the gas thing or the Bunsen burner on, so that it blows it up. But I don't know. I think maybe that only works because it is on literally a smaller scale. I wonder, could that have been taken care of by literally anybody else? You wonder, like, I don't
well,
know.
I mean, I feel like for anyone who hasn't seen it, the main threat of this episode, besides just the danger of being small, is they are small and also they're in the backyard of some shady deal with this guy who's like, I want to market and sell this new fucking pesticide or whatever it is, and this doctor won't sign off on it because it's poisonous and it'll seep into the ground and water, kill people. So I've shot him, and the scientist that developed the pesticide is now roped into it. And I'm just like, they don't need to solve that problem. That someone would just find out in the
Yeah. Oh, and
process.
it's a different doctor, not the
Like,
doctor.
yeah.
Can you
Oh,
imagine
yeah.
that? The doctor getting shot? That would.
While he's
Oh,
tiny, fucking obliterated.
just fucking incoming.
Ain't
missile.
regenerating from that one.
It reminds me of an old an old plumbing the Death Star bit where it's like shooting a crab with a harpoon gun, where it's like that crab is alive 1 minute and then gone the next.
Which is funny because the doctor did get shot in the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's like he shows up in LA one time in the 90s and he just immediately gets shot in a gang
3
war.
seconds after stepping foot in LA, he gets shot in the chest twice.
Oh, yeah.
That's what happened.
We should do the movie at some point. It's the
Oh,
8th
yeah.
Doctor is the only one we haven't discussed for the podcast. Well, that and the 11th and 12th Doctors. But like in terms of classic Doctors, the 8th is the only one we haven't discussed yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree.
But going back to the episode's like premise, like it's one of the first episodes of the show, and I think one of the first TV stories in the BBC to do have an environmental message, like because I think this was around the time when that kind of thing was becoming more prominent in the world, where people were starting to learn more about what we were doing to the planet, and like it was starting to become way more narratively involved in that regard. And I think that look, there are stories you can do that in, but I do feel like that is kind of to the detriment of a story like this, because when you think about like shrinking stories where people are unexpectedly shrunk and need to figure out how to get back to big, a key sequence that you immediately imagine. Get back. Yeah, they gotta get big. We need to. We've gone to small. Now we must get back to big. But one of the main sequences you visualize in your head immediately, even if you're just like, you're right there.
I'm sorry. It's just now I'm imagining like Doc Brown and Marty. But it's like, it's your kids, Marty. They've gone small. We gotta get them back to big.
We gotta go big, Marty.
This Saturday night, we're making you big. But one of the first things you always picture in a story like this is the classic, oh no, the things that are normally inconsequential for us because we are the size that we are now way more important. Like, running away from big insects is the main thing that you think of. And in a story like this, where every single insect that they see dies very quickly or is dead from the start,
Or
you don't get any
away.
of that. Like, there are no stakes at all for like the first 2 chapters of this, because there is literally nothing that can hunt and kill them. There's a cat briefly at the end of episode 1, but then it just sort of walks off on its own.
Although-
this story has some of the best like ending stingers ever, because you've got giant cat face.
Yeah.
You're like, next time, and then you've got sink.
Yeah, it's a class. The sync one especially, it shows up on videos like the best Doctor Who cliffhangers
Yeah.
in the show, and it
Yeah, it's just
and
like
it's such
we've got a
a-
sink we can clean up in.
That's That's such a Doctor Who thing. I love that so much. But I will say with the cat though, because I wondered about that when I watched it a second time. I'm like, oh, is this just one of those dumb Doctor cliffhangers that gets immediately resolved? But isn't the idea that the cat kind of goes away near the door, and they're like, oh, I guess we can't go near the door again because the cat's just going to get us, so we've got to think of something else. I mean, maybe
I don't
maybe
remember
I'm
why they were
misremembering
wanting
that,
to. Well, I don't think it goes somewhere, but I don't think it goes towards the door, because at that point, I think their plan is to just go back to the TARDIS. I don't think they've come up with the thing of like we need to like fully explore like our surroundings yet and figure out what's going on with these people. Oh no, maybe not, because they had already come across the corpse.
Yeah,
So
well,
maybe
yeah, because like they
maybe,
hear the cannon shot.
Yeah.
I will say though, it probably doesn't pay off as well as it could, but I think to an extent there is like something to be said for like, uh-oh, we're small, now we're gonna get eaten by like bugs and shit, and then every time you find a bug, it's already dead. There's something to be
Yeah.
said for like, oh, actually, that's kind of suspenseful. What's
Oh,
There
killing
yeah.
all?
is.
Like,
Well,
it doesn't pay off particularly spectacularly, but like,
But there's still cleverness there, I
yeah,
think.
like
a bit.
in as
But
like
my
a cost cutting.
Oh yeah,
it's a decent justification for, yeah, we can build an ant. It's not fucking moving.
yeah,
though.
it's a classic
yeah,
example.
Not in a million
true.
years.
But
It's
like
like
my main
go ahead.
issue with that though is that it means that like for the first half of the story, when the characters are like, for me, like even despite like the stuff like that, even like with the first season of Adventures in the TARDIS withstanding, if I am ever an inch tall, I am the most stressed that I have ever been. And I don't
Well, it
think
takes
that's
them a
unfair thing
good
to
while to
say.
figure it out, which is
It does, but even
almost
after
kind of weird.
But even after they figure it out, once they do, like, even if I was to happen upon that realization, I think I would have a full-on panic attack. But the fact that there is nothing around that is endangering them at all means they're just sort of like strolling around at their leisure, and it doesn't really, like, I don't know, like, I feel
Yeah.
like this, what we were talking about with Family of Blood and Human Nature, is that episode works so well because it is a story that you can only tell in Doctor Who once.
Yeah.
And because of that, they do absolutely everything they can with the premise. I'm watching this story and I'm going, wow, this is something you can only do in Doctor Who once. And I'm actively watching like things that they could
That's
be
not
doing
true. You can shrink again, but this time inside a
into
Dalek.
a Dalek. Yeah, and look how well that turned out. But like accidentally shrinking and wandering around a regular suburban British home is something that you can't do again in Doctor Who, because the Doctor would just go, "Huh, I've seen this before. I know what to do." And as I'm watching this episode, I'm like, "You're squandering so much potential by not having stuff for them to run away from while they're tiny in the first episode."
Yeah,
I don't know. It just felt a bit disappointing in that regard.
no, I agree. I was just more like devil's advocate, considering the obvious budgetary restraints.
Well, sure.
They
Yeah.
they at least did something somewhat interesting
Yeah,
with
They do.
the fact that all the bugs were dead and not a threat.
Yeah.
That
I think
ultimately doesn't pay off in the most interesting way, but
yeah, for
it's
sure.
something as opposed to nothing.
Yeah, I think there are a few things to be said about it. Also, just a small thing. The idea of the Doctor or a companion shrinking, that does actually happen again. Enemy where they have to fight like I think it's like an intelligent virus or a bacteria, and they have to shrink. I think they might actually somehow. I don't know how this happens. I think they go inside the Doctor's body, like in his
Well, they magic school
bloodstream.
bus it.
Oh
Yes.
no.
No, legitimately, I'm pretty sure that's what it.
What is it called? The invisible enemy?
There's some line in it, I think, where the Doctor says, "Oh, well, this is my everything about it," or something like that. I might be misremembering, but either way, yes, they magic school bus it.
Sorry,
Basically.
hang on a moment. Sorry, when you were describing this, I'm picturing Patrick Troughton in my head. How the fuck is this a Tom Baker and Leela
Yeah,
episode?
no.
It's also the first
I think I
K9
kind of
story.
remember that one actually.
It's
Yep.
the first K9 story?
Yep, I'm pretty sure it is. The there's like scientists that the Doctor meets on this planet that's there, and he invents K9, and that's where he gets K9 from.
Yeah. I don't remember a lot of the details, but I do remember that one.
I think it's in season 15.
They
So yeah,
they create tiny clones of themselves to put
Yeah.
into the Doctor's
It's
body.
Yep.
Parasites Lost. It's the Futurama episode.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So
He's got
See, I
lungs
already
that make
pictured-
him muscular and good at holophoners.
I can already picture that being a story that does this premise better than Planet of Giants and, in fact, Into the Daleks.
Because the other thing is, if I'm remembering that episode right, shrinking down is not the only thing that story is about. There's other shit going on.
Yeah.
like combating disease.
And
It's
also,
like... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, here's the other thing as well. Is that the main thing that, like, obviously it's the TARDIS shrinking that causes all this to happen in the first place. And as a 12th Doctor fan, I of course relate this to Flatline, an episode where the TARDIS also shrinks, but the interior dimensions don't. And obviously there are different reasons behind it, so I'm not like, oh, hang on, this is inconsistent now. No, they happen for different reasons. But even then, I'm like, in that episode, the TARDIS shrinking is utilized to its fullest extent. Like, we explore what, like, all of the consequences and the actions and all that stuff. And Flatline is really the only fantastic episode in Peter Capaldi's first season, so I look upon it even more favorably as a result. With this, I'm kind of like, okay, not only are they squandering the potential of this, but also, like, the story that they choose to tell with it is also, like, because like them exploring the laboratory of this biochemist who's unintentionally made this thing is now being used by an evil, like, money hungry business dude who doesn't really think through, oh wait a minute, if I get my money I still die. It's, I just don't, whenever they cut back to that dude and Smithers, I think I just keep going, okay, skip, move on, I don't care. Like, they're just not interesting characters. I don't care about them.
They are very cookie cutter. And have you also noticed that the acting for those characters isn't great? Like, the
No, not at all.
performances of the main characters are way better, and you can tell that's because the main actors are giving a shit. Whereas the businessmen and the Smithers and the scientists, they're very hammy. Like, and that's not terrible for a Doctor Who story. There are a lot of characters that are like that.
It feels like when stage actors don't know how to act for film and just assume they can do it the same way they do stage acting.
Yep.
Almost.
A bit, yeah.
And the most interesting visual stuff, I think, even maybe with the camera, is done when you see the mini stuff, which is kind of interesting. I'll say this, though, for the premise and the way it's used. I kind of agree with you both. Is this premise used as well as it could be? No. And are the reasons that it's not being used as well as it could be largely due to the budget and not being able to work around it properly? Yeah, that's absolutely true. With that said, I think it is still admirable what they do with the story and the budget, and the fact that they work in this sort of bigger plot of evil pesticide, we got to stop it. That it's kind of it does help the story by giving it a bit of direction, because I think you said, Sam, ages ago when we were talking about this story, you said that this story was 3 episodes long and doesn't need to be any longer. Now, part of that, I think, is because of that bigger plot of the insecticide, because if they
Yeah.
didn't have that, you would
I
just
mean,
have the
honestly,
story
this
of them
story could
wandering
also be
around.
2 episodes, and I would be fine with that as well. But I think
Mm.
3 is fine for
Yeah.
it.
See, it's really interesting to me
Mm.
because I'm watching this 3-episode story and I'm going, wow, a lot of this is really rushed.
It
Even
is
even
a
before
little.
even before learning that episode 3 is 2 episodes split into one.
Mm.
Watching that, you're going, there's a lot of weird cuts here, and they've like. But then in episode 1, even, which was largely intact by the merge, there's a moment where the gang are looking for Ian, who's sort of been separated by jumping into by essentially Mr. Magooing into a matchbox.
Yeah.
And then he discovers the corpse, takes one step off screen, and then the very next shot is the TARDIS crew all together again. There's no like
Yeah, no.
reunion
I
or
mean-
anything, and Ian is like halfway through describing what he's seen,
Mm.
and it's very jarring. Where you're like, whoa, hang on, whoa, we've missed a few steps here. So
There's also-
it's really
Yeah, I
weird
mean,
in that
yeah,
regard.
when
where
I-
it's
when
a
I say
really
I think
rushed-
it could
it's
be-
a rushed serial, but it's also one where it's like this is slower than it should be.
Yeah, like when I say it could be 2, I'm more like in the scripting and writing stage. You could have
Yeah.
dropped some subplots altogether so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
what you do have, you can make much tighter.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I kind of see what you mean there, Cuff, because there are also a lot of weird fades to black. Have you noticed that? There's a lot
Yes.
of which for Doctor Who is a bit strange. Maybe not so much in the 60s with the first first couple of seasons when they're trying to still figure out what the show is. I'm sure we've seen other examples of it in First Doctor stories that we've covered even up to this point, but I can't imagine that happening in, with Third Doctor stories, for example. Like that gap, we would see that gap. We would see the Doctor walking to that area, dealing with change. The pacing is at the very least odd. It's quite odd, regardless of how long or short this story is. I think my overall point though is when you put it all together, with the fact that they're clearly trying to make the story fit the budget and the special effects that they're using. I still think it's admirable, but it's a case, as with a lot of Doctor Who, it's more admirable than it is enjoyable, because there's very clearly just very bizarre elements in this script where you're sort of sitting there scratching your head, and not even in a the chase situation where you just kind of have to sit back and go along with the wild ride. Yeah, it's
I
odd.
mean-
It's an odd one.
Yeah, and look, we've been sort of hinting at this throughout the discussion so far, but it really needs to be said. The most impressive thing about this story is the production design for
Yeah.
a low budget 1964 TV
Like
story.
the sink, I couldn't believe how realistic that looked.
Yeah,
like- It even other things like the matches and the fact that the insects are dead, again, it kind of helps with that. It's like, oh yeah, they're clearly not moving. But there's even a bit where I think it's a mosquito that
I think
confronts.
it's just a fly.
it's a fly.
Is it a
yeah.
fly?
Just a
Yeah,
regular
maybe it's
house
a
fly.
fly.
It's a house fly,
That
yeah.
confronts Barbara and then just flies away. But there's there's a rushing. The camera rushes towards Barbara. It still works, and also there's a shot where the water
I mean,
is
that shot
flowing
of
down.
that shot of Barbara where she's just like she just sees the fly
Mm,
and just like looks at it for a bit and then just passes out.
and then
I
faints.
always think
Yeah.
it's very funny.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a shot where the water's flowing down the sink, Doctor and Susan standing, behind the water. It clearly looks like some sort of superimposed effect, but it still looks pretty convincing. So that even though we make fun of the whole cliffhanger of he's turned on the sink, that still has a certain amount of dramatic weight to it. And the fact that they're able to do that, again, is quite admirable. And it's, as you say, Cuff, it's sort of anchored with this good production design.
Yeah,
So
there
yeah,
are
good for
a
them.
handful of like superimposed. It's mainly when like they need to be like walking in front of something like the test tubes or the corpse or anything like that, and like it's all like you can tell it's a not maybe not a green screen but something of that effect. But it's like it's still pretty good looking.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have that thing that often happens in superimposed shots where like they haven't gotten the perspective right or the lighting right or anything like that. Like they've done a lot of work to try and match the two shots together in a convincing enough way, at least.
Considering, you know, what I can only assume would have been a tiny budget they were working with.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, I mean, unless there's anything else you want to talk about on this topic, but there's a couple of elements with the plot that I want to bring up. One, I think, is a bit less egregious with hindsight, but anyway. So the first thing I want to bring up is Barbara. Now, her story arc is a little odd and kind of interesting because she gets in contact with this toxic substance. It's kind of brushed aside very quickly in the blocking and the pacing of the scene, but we still realize, oh, something freaky's going on here. But there was a point, especially on the first watch of this story, where I thought, why doesn't she just tell somebody what's happened to her? Like, I get that there are moments where she's being interrupted and stuff, but I feel like in other Doctor Who stories, she would have said something. That being said, I watched it again, and I can't even 100% say why, but there's something about the way those scenes are blocked and paced in conjunction with her characterization where I can kind of believe that she wouldn't tell anybody. So
I mean,
it still kind of
A
works.
lot of the time before she has a big collapse,
Hmm.
it's mainly on the heels of like some extraneous like physical activity, like climbing down a chain. So I could realistically think of her as being like she didn't really put the pieces together until like
yeah, I was gonna say,
they
like,
started to
I
explore
don't
the effect of
remember,
the insecticide.
but does she even realize that she has been poisoned
Yeah.
until the point where?
Yeah, there's
It's
bits where she's like, she keeps asking, oh, you know, can we find a cure for it? Oh, did that thing actually die over there?
Yeah,
I suppose so.
Had you know, the insecticide on them. I thought it was just like preserving oil or something. So there's little bits where the cogs are clearly turning in her head where she's like, oh yeah, this is
Well,
serious, but the other
I could
characters
almost
aren't
see
picking
that.
up on it.
I could almost see that as just kind of like and it's something that people do all the time, where it's like, oh, this this mole on my arm. I'm sure it's nothing.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Like
yeah, that's because
she's
Yeah.
probably thinking about it in her head, being like, oh, I've touched this thing. Do I have to worry about this? I think I feel fine. I didn't die instantly
Yeah.
like the insecticide
And
is shown to do on the insects. Like because before
Yeah.
that point, anything that touches the insecticide dies immediately. So I assume that's going through her
Yeah.
head, where it's like, oh, that didn't
Yeah.
happen to me. I must be
And-
okay. But
and then
as
the tension keeps building
Yeah.
as time
Yeah,
goes by, and she sees more of the insects dying, and yeah.
She
So
starts
I guess
feeling
that can kind of
sicker
work.
and sicker. Yeah.
Yeah. And then by the end, she, reaches that crisis point. So I suppose, yeah, that kind of works. Because I wondered, would it work if any of the other characters were doing that? But I realized I don't think it would. Because I don't think it would. I don't think it would work if Susan would do it, because Susan kind of trusts the Doctor enough so that she would be able to say, "Hey, grandfather, I'm feeling really unwell. You know what? Or I'm starting to feel unwell, and I maybe touched the insecticide earlier. Let's do something about it." So I don't know.
I mean,
It
like,
does seem kind of odd, but it works enough.
even setting aside character and like personal, as in like characterization and personality, and thinking more like character in terms of narrative structure.
Mm.
I don't like if Ian got poisoned, he would be like, "Nah, I gotta push through it because I'm the big, strong, brave man." If
Mm.
Susan got poisoned, then she probably would have like fainted much sooner, and the story would have been like, we gotta find a cure for Susan, and like really shifted. And if the
Yeah.
doctor had been poisoned, they would have been like, oh no, he's the only one who knows how to fucking undo everything, and then that would have been the source of tension. Whereas if it's Barbara, it's just kind of like, she's got
Yeah.
enough constitution that she can fight it off, so that it's not the be all end all of the plot,
Yeah.
but it's still a thing that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. Yeah, the other thing, and this is something that does kind of bother me a little bit because I think it sort of, you know, breaks the rules that are being set up in this story. When the Doctor takes the grain of wheat, so it shrinks as
Yeah,
TARDIS and the crew are
Yeah.
growing bigger.
yeah.
I don't know if I believe that because isn't it established that everything in the TARDIS, incling the TARDIS
Yeah, no,
itself,
I think that is the show breaking its own rules for the
Yeah.
Well,
sake of like
it's
showing
also,
off a thing.
I mean, even worse, it's the way that they cure Barbara, which, I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same rules that they're trying to imply.
Because like
with
it's
the
just like, well,
brain.
once we make her big, the poison will be too small to kill her.
Yeah.
Which I
like,
found
no.
really it reminded me of this joke from an episode of Adventure Time, where because what happens is Jake gets poisoned by an assassin, and the assassin's like, haha, that's enough poison to kill 30 dogs. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, because Jake has stretchy powers, so he just makes his liver 31 times bigger, and he can
And
just
it
process
processes
the
the poison.
poison, and he's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like it's not. It's the kind of resolution where if they had just not taken the grain of wheat to emphasize like what's going on,
As
I
like a
don't think it would
visual
be as
symbol.
I don't think
yeah.
it would be as obvious that something's going wrong with the show's internal logic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as soon as it does, you're like, wait so hang on a minute. Like maybe
Yeah. But like at the
they're
same
saying,
time, the audience can't see the poison get smaller, so
Yes.
they
Yeah.
need a visual
I mean,
indicator of what's happening.
if there had been a line where it's like, oh no, like because we shrunk initially, we're just returning
Or
to
like
normal
we're
size.
coated in TARDIS particles, so
Yeah, we're coded
we
in
will be
in
consistent,
Artron
but
energy.
nothing else
So
in the garden will.
Yeah, like a single line like that would have been
yeah. Mind
enough.
you,
I
not
think
that
we couldn't
not
stop
that
Yeah,
long.
anyone knew
I
what
think it's
Artron
way
energy
too
was
early
back
in the
then.
show for them to be caring about shit like that. Is
Oh, yeah.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. There's that's just a lack of foresight, and that's just a symbol of a show still trying to find its feet at that
Yeah.
point.
Like we're still in a point
Mm.
where like the TARDIS is only called the TARDIS like half the time, and it's
Yeah.
just a ship.
Isn't
The
it
other
like?
half.
Doesn't it start as like just a nickname that Susan comes up with?
Yeah,
It's
no.
Susan
For
comes up with,
for
and then,
most of the first season, they just call it the ship.
Yeah.
TARDIS is established to be a nickname that Susan comes up with, but then every single Time Lord that we see in the future refers to it as a TARDIS. Even
Yeah.
the ones that, even like jumping ahead to the revival era, when in the name of the Doctor we see the Doctor and Susan stealing the TARDIS, the Time Lords that are there call it a TARDIS. And curiously, so does the Fugitive Doctor.
Yeah. So here's my grasping at straws justification for that, right? Is that we, the audience, are also affected by the TARDIS's translation matrix. So whenever there's an instance of something like that where you're like, yeah, when you hear the word TARDIS, you know what is being talked about.
Yeah.
So that's what you hear in every context that it could possibly be. Like the Time Lords probably have some other fucking weird fancy. Like every time we see a Time Lord in the show, they're actually speaking Gallifreyan. But we, the audience, are hearing English because that's just how the show has to work.
But
for
it also
to be able
kind
to work.
It kind of has to be that anyway, because like
basically.
let's not forget the TARDIS is an acronym or an anagram, whichever one it is.
Acronym.
Yeah.
Anagram is swapping letters around.
Yes. It's an acronym of words that would obviously be different in Gallifreyan.
Yeah.
Obviously, this stems from the show in 1963 not really having established that those characters are in fact aliens.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
they're just nebulously from the future.
I don't
Yeah.
think that the Time Lords as a concept. I don't think that was established until the War Games, which was Pat Troughton's last
Yeah,
Yeah.
potentially.
story.
No,
So
like I
yeah,
don't think there's any indication that the Doctor is not human until he regenerates. Because
Yeah.
then you're like, well, that's clearly not a thing humans can do.
Yeah.
Oh, we all do this in the future.
Yeah, I think that was the other big thing for me. Just the bit with the grain of wheat that doesn't.
Yeah.
And again, you can tell, you know why it's happened like that.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing, though.
Mhm.
And initially, I'm happy that the show acknowledges these people aren't stupid enough to believe that this man speaking through a telephone into a napkin sounds enough like this totally distinct person that it
Yeah, that
fools
was.
them. I'm happy that it acknowledges that. But at the same time, it then leads to a police officer being sent to the place. And theoretically, like by that point, Smithers has already learned the dangerous nature of the DN6 and probably wouldn't want it to be put on market anyway. So he either would have been shot or the policeman would have arrived before that happened. At which point, the arrival of the police officer solves the conflict in a way that if the TARDIS crew hadn't been
it's
there,
the Raiders of the Lost Ark bit where you're like,
Yeah.
Indy being there doesn't change what happens at all.
it doesn't affect the outcome. It might have saved one life, but that's ultimately
Like
it.
the only
Yeah.
like in the Raiders example, the only meaningful thing that Indy does at the end of the story is that the Ark is now in a warehouse in a box instead of on that random island surrounded by dead Germans.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think I can disagree with you there. Because like I think I initially thought, oh yeah, no, they're doing something with the plot. They're destroying the DN6. But as you say, wouldn't something have happened to it anyway? Like if you've got police raiding this, what looks like to be clearly
Like, even if the
illegal
police
activity.
don't show up, I do not for a second believe that more testing of the thing before
Yeah.
it goes on market wouldn't have happened anyway.
Because it seems like a pretty like hush-hush situation, right? This is obviously an unregulated chemical. And
Well, yeah, because like the alternative is like it goes on the market, and you're like, what happened to that guy that we sent to test the thing before we start selling it? Oh, he died under mysterious circumstances.
He died. He
Oh,
died.
Did he just? Okay.
He died in
well,
a boating. He died in a boating accident with a bullet in his heart.
Yeah.
That's not going to pass the smell test.
No.
Even in the 60s, people
Yeah,
are gonna
no,
be like,
yeah.
I don't think that's what happened.
Yeah, I just love that
Yeah.
guy's rationalization of like, oh, don't worry, I know how I'm going to just take care of this body. I'm just going to dump it in the ocean, like because it's established he's going on a boating accident. And it's like, cool. How are you going to talk your way out of the police discovering a bullet in his heart? Oh, that was a shark. A shark shot him.
Yeah, it was a bullet shark.
And you also say that, like, oh yes, they destroyed the insecticide, but they destroyed like one aerosol can of the insecticide.
They also
like,
didn't destroy the formula.
They didn't destroy the formula. There's plenty of test tubes with chemicals still in them. There's also insecticide covering the garden that they're in. Which another thing is, like, if that garden is entirely sprayed with insecticide, as they're walking through the grass, they must be breathing it in.
And
they must be.
Didn't they say like it would be bad for it to get in the soil, but hasn't it already gotten to the soil?
It's already gotten in that soil, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think a small backyard's worth of contaminated soil is going to be enough to like actually cause problems. But
no,
but it's still weird that that's not sort of resolved as well as it could be.
Well, at the very least, like them destroying the one can doesn't eliminate
No.
the formula forever. There's heaps of
No.
evidence that it still exists. So even if that is their involvement in the story, it's like cool.
Yeah.
It's still effectively nothing that you guys did.
Yeah.
Like I said, the only active involvement they take in the story is blinding the guy with the gun in a way that exploding aerosol cans don't do.
I thought it was like an explosion of the insecticide that like hit him in the face, and I thought, oh, maybe it's working like Mace does or something. But
It is, but
Yeah.
if you've essentially put a flamethrower on a can of aerosolized chemicals, that's a firebomb. That's not a shrapnel
that's true.
grenade.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Like I said, like
Yeah.
a lot of the like because the insecticide plot is complete nonsense thanks to the mob style nature of the hiding the body kind of thing. So and also the TARDIS crew's involvement in the story ultimately amounts to very little. So at that point, the only enjoyment that I'm actually getting out of the story is watching the TARDIS crew exploring a regular garden and a regular house while tiny. And again, the nature of the insecticide plot takes away a lot of the threats that they would naturally encounter in an experience like that. So I'm only getting half of the enjoyment out of that anyway.
Yeah, sure.
It's just not a well-realized version of this concept. And that really bums me out because when you were initially describing this story, Sam, a while back, I was picturing something way more insane than this. And I was really looking forward to seeing that version of Planet of Giants. And I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, compared to what has come before, yeah, this shit's crazy. But like
No,
looking at it on its own in a vacuum, nah.
I'm fully willing to accept that.
It's like
as well.
I would say it's more a novelty than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, this might be unfair in a number of ways, but this really feels like a Moffat script, like a Moffat era Moffat story, where he's thought of something really cool, but then he hasn't put enough thought in to realize the concept properly in a way that makes sense. Like
I can understand that.
Just like a lot of Moffat stories, there's some world-breaking stuff with the grain of wheat.
Yeah.
There's some plot-breaking stuff with the shooting of the guy, and there's a heaps of character stuff in there as well, like potentially with Barbara being out of character and not coming to the forefront with this information sooner, so that the plot can happen. There are a lot of Moffat-isms in Planet of the Giants that, if they were in a Moffat story, I think they'd be more noticeable.
Although I wonder if that's partly because, modern technology, modern special effects, there wouldn't be that kind of, there's no excuse, if that makes sense. Like,
that is very true. But I'm also I'm like putting aside I'm just looking at this script in isolation as a script.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, from a narrative standpoint, sure. No, I think that makes sense. There are some comparisons you can make to some of the stranger creative decisions Moffat has taken over the years. So, fair enough. Fuck, I was going to say something. I can't remember what it is now. Oh, I remember. So, like I said, this story, it's certainly more admirable than enjoyable, and it's clearly, I think, a sign of a show still trying to find its feet. But it is still really interesting and bizarre to look at this, first story of season 2. Yeah, that's what you said, isn't it, Cuff? Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. And comparing it to The Chase, which is the second last story, they are a lot different in terms of what they're able to accomplish. Don't get me wrong, they're both still limited because they're both low-budget BBC shows from the 60s, but The Chase is a lot wilder, a lot more expansive, and even though it's more surreal and it's taking more tangents, it's a lot more satisfying in a lot of ways. I think we can all safely say we enjoyed The Chase more than this.
Yeah.
So it's just strange, and even like you say, Cuff, about the missed opportunity with the concept. if you look at stuff like the chase or even the time meddler, they're using those concepts pretty well, I think. I mean, maybe they could push them further, but
I don't know. Time Meddler didn't have any time meddling until the last episode.
yeah, that's true. I think I actually even said like I think there's one episode called A
There's
Battle
very
of
little
Wits, where it's
meddling
like,
in this Time Meddler.
yeah, it's like there's an episode called A Battle of Wits, and I'm like, no, there's more physical battles than mental battles. So, but still, I think it's used a bit better than the concept is here, and the concept of the chase is used a lot better because it is a chase through time and space. So
Something
Yeah.
I will say about this story is that this might be my favorite characterization of the first Doctor in like that I've seen so far. Anyway, he's not terribly grumpy in this. Like, and in fact, there's a moment
Yeah.
where he actually apologizes for yelling at or like snapping
for
at
losing
Barbara
his temper.
for losing his temper. Yeah. And like he's prioritizing like the well-being of his, like, obviously this is a very low bar to clear for the Doctor, but he's prioritizing like the well-being and safety of his traveling companions. He's utilizing them, and like he's like there's a lot of teamwork involved. Like there's not much of like the crotchety old man here in this portrayal.
Well, it kind of goes back to something I think Sam you pointed out, which is that I think you said that Hartnell gets an unfair rap as being the cranky old man, when in fact there's a lot more to him than
Yeah.
that, and I think that's very clear in this story.
Like
And
I
that
was
moment,
saying in the
was
Romans, he spends most of that karate chopping guys and running around
rubbing
giggling
his
like
hands,
a
going,
like a little gremlin.
yeah. He's got that kind of sense of fun, but he's also got that sense of compassion there too. And to your point, Cuff, in bringing up that one moment where he apologizes, and you, I think, would have more experience in this topic than I would. But if we compare that moment to first season Capaldi, for example, I find it a little hard to imagine that Capaldi would have apologized in a moment like that quickly. Maybe you'll disagree with me there, Cuff, but I'll just put that idea to you anyway.
Certainly, first half of that season, yeah. There is a point around about this two-thirds of the way through where he kind of softens a bit. It's like the 1-2 combo of Mummy on the Orient Express and Flatline, which like go a long way into roughly like sanding down those edges a bit.
Is Dark Water in season 8?
It is, yeah.
Because that's what I'm mainly thinking of. There was one scene where I saw where they find out, the please don't cremate me bit. But I remember watching that and I thought, is this the same show? Like, what the fuck is happening here? He's such a nasty, mean old man in that scene. I'm like, this is way worse than anything that I think, or at least most of what Hartnell ever did. So, anyway, that's just a funny little comparison that sort of came to mind. But certainly, to your point, Cuff, I think, yeah, you're right. There's some really pleasant and interesting characterizations of the Doctor here. You really feel for him and the TARDIS crew, which is kind of great.
This episode also does really well. It's like it does a good job of like presenting this crew as like a really like solid unit altogether. Like there's a lot of teamwork happening.
Yeah.
They're all looking out for each other. You can tell just from like this episode alone that they all four of them really genuinely care for each other, and it's really great to see. Again, low bar to clear, but Classic Who is not. It's not uncommon in Classic Who for the Doctor to show genuine vitriol for his traveling companion. And like this isn't just like a Sixth Doctor thing, First Doctor thing. There are moments of nastiness. I think that all of the classic Doctors have at certain points for their companions, which is a bit odd at times.
Patrick Troughton's Doctor bullies Jamie. Tom Baker makes fun of Leela because she's, a quote-unquote savage at points, which is a bit uncomfortable. So, and also there's let's be honest, pretty sexist way that the Third Doctor treats Jo in particular. So it's not.
I mean, fucking David Tennant in Shakespeare Code is just casually hand waving races and shit. So
yeah. And there's all
It's
the
not
horrible,
completely gone.
yeah,
No.
and all the horrible ways that Mickey is treated as well.
Yep. And Rory
And-
initially.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
also with the knowledge that Noel Clark is a piece of shit, I don't care as much about the Mickey
Yeah,
Yeah,
anymore.
that does take a
Yeah.
lot of the edge off it.
yeah, touche.
Also, like this is a minor thing, but have you guys both seen Adventure in Space and Time?
I've
Yes.
seen a bit of it.
Twice,
Okay,
actually.
cool. I've seen it a couple times.
I
There's
cried actually watching it the first time.
yeah, it's genuinely quite emotional. It might genuinely be the best thing Mark Gatiss has ever written. But there's a moment in like a quick cut montage of that where they're showing the filming of Doctor Who and like small moments of William Hartnell kind of slipping. And one of those moments I think is a direct reference to this episode. When they're talking about the fault locator. There's like a moment in that special where to show that William Hartnell is struggling to remember all of his lines the right way. He misspeaks, and the line he says is "Quick, check the fornicator." So when that line was first said in this, I didn't hear fault locator. I kept hearing fornicator, and I had to go into like a Doctor Who transcripts website to be like, "What the hell is he saying?"
Yeah. Good God.
I remember that special accidentally ruined the master reveal in Spyfall.
In
For me?
Spyfall. Oh, because of Sacha Dhawan.
Yeah, because like in that episode, she keeps talking about this guy like she knows him previously,
Yeah.
and I like looked at his face. And I'm like, I know this guy specifically
Oh.
in the context of Doctor Who, but I don't remember where
So
or
you
why
looked up.
she's talking about him like he's so familiar. So I looked him up, and I was like, oh. And then I see his credit in the episode before I've got to the end of it. I'm like,
Damn.
oh yeah, okay, well that makes sense. But then I was like, oh yes, he was in Adventure in Space and Time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just like one like small thing that I noted really early that it's kind of like an earworm in my head being like, and I kept listening out for if in Adventure in Space and Time they're specifically pulling from like an outtake that was accidentally left in an episode where he did like call it a fornicator, and like they pulled on that because I think they do that a bit in that special where they pull from stuff that like there's a lot of genuine historical research into stuff that actually happened.
I don't doubt it.
I was listening out for like the clear word fornicator to come up.
I'm surprised that like
happened, so.
because when you said that that it references a moment that Hartnell had when he was misremembering his lines, I was surprised that it's not the you could wind up somewhere in the middle of Spain that he says at the end of the chase instead of space, and you can clearly hear him fumbling the line at the end of that story.
Technically, Spain is in space, so he's not wrong.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is there anything else to mention?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm just the more we've been speaking about the episode's faults, the more disappointed I've been getting. And like, because when I watched it, I thought it was fun, but like thinking back on it now, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I just wish it was better.
I think
I will say it felt more fun for me watching it that first time about a year ago when I was watching it sequentially with everything else than it did when I rewatched it yesterday.
Yeah.
Just on its own. But yeah.
No, I think that's fair. And I think one of the most frustrating parts about it is like I talk about how admirable it is that they were able to make it work as well as they did. But the fact is there are other even early on in the show that that pay off better than what they're doing here, right? Like the chase is a bigger risk, but it's working better than it is here. I'd say even the same with the Time Meddler. Like I've always said that one of the things I love about Doctor Who is that it shows that beautiful sort of ingenuity that only comes from a mix of desperation through, a lack of resources, whether it be financial or special effects or narrative, even whatever it is,
Yeah.
and pure inspiration and that beautiful middle ground. But there are better examples of it in the show than this. I mean, we literally just looked at Blink. That's a better example of innovation than this is.
That's a bold statement, Fitz, saying that Blink is better than Planet of Giants.
Man, the Planet of
You'll
the
get
Giants
some
fans are
angry comments for that one.
Yeah,
they're gonna come after you. There, I'm gonna be on the podcast next week with a different person because you've become too unpopular to be marketable for the podcast.
Now
Yeah.
I'm the Fitz.
God, Jesus. Oh no, yeah, the Planet of the Giant fans, they're coming for me in droves. Fuck my,
It's
all over.
ironically quite a big portion of the fan base. But yeah, like I said, it's mainly for me. I'm just really, it's just a shame for me.
Yeah.
Because like I even looking on the Wikipedia page for this story, the image that they choose to put front and center is Ian and Susan looking at the ants, and that just there's so much promise in that image alone.
Yeah.
That the episode just doesn't.
You want a First Doctor story with some big fucking bugs? Don't
Oh
worry.
yeah, you got the Web Planet.
Web Planet's fucking great.
Okay.
We do have to look
Planet
at that story eventually.
It's season 2 story, so I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not.
No, I
mean-
it is. I think it is a series 2 story. So
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
enjoying
Look,
it because it is batshit
that
insane.
episode is 100% carried by the costumes of these fucking butterfly moth people and their enemies, the big fly wasp hornet people.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
I don't give a shit about a single thing they're saying or doing when they're on screen. I'm like, these guys are the fucking best.
I have seen well, I mean, I've obviously seen the story, but I love the performances of the Menoptera, the butterfly
Yeah,
people. They're so over the top, even by Doctor Who standards. Like, I don't know whether they were told, oh, you're going to be acting through heavy makeup, so make it big and impressive, but Jesus Christ. The levels of melodrama and histrionics that the performers who play the Menoptera are putting on. Cuff, you and I have both been in Gilbert and Sullivan shows in high school that aren't that melodramatic. That's how
dear.
over the top.
Fuck. Oh.
It's so fun. It's so fun.
The
It's
moral
so
of the
good.
story is season 15 should bring back the Zabi and not change the costumes at all.
Yep. It's literally it's like, imagine, Cuff, people with giant ant costumes on their heads with human legs.
Yeah. Like imagine an ant. Imagine an ant with 2 human legs just coming out the bottom.
And making weird squeaky noises. And that's it.
Uh-huh.
Bring him back.
Oh.
Change nothing.
What I'm hearing is that the unicorn and the wasp would have been much better if it was a Zabi and not just a big wasp.
I would have loved that. Actually, you know what? The Menoptera have almost like a. In fact, Menoptera, I think, is the either the species or the genus or whatever the name is for bees. So it would have made sense.
Oh, are they?
Is it, or is it butterflies I'm thinking of?
I know butterflies are Lepidoptera.
Oh, Menoptera. Yeah, I think it
Menoptera might be
bees
moths.
Menoptera, Menoptera. All I'm finding is stuff for Doctor Who. I'm not seeing any scientific thing.
Maybe it's just playing off those kinds of things. Actually, I'm not sure.
Man, yeah, I'm looking this up as well, and all I'm getting is the Web Planet. But I swear to God, I read I read a science book when I was a kid, like one page, but I don't know why the fuck I read it. But it had the word Menoptera, and of course, this is when I was, fascinated with Doctor Who. So you can imagine how my brain just exploded when I read that. It's like, oh, there's scientific precedence in a sci-fi show. Who'd have thunk it?
It looks like it was inspired by Lepidoptera.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so more butterfly than bee.
Yeah,
But
bees are like Apiidae and stuff.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it's a combination of the word men and Lepidoptera or something.
Actually, that's probably it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man butterflies.
Yeah.
Menoptera. Yeah, I can see that.
Either way, batshit performances, and we will have to look at that story at some point because I've heard it has kind of a bad reputation, but I just remember it being so ridiculous and fun.
Are you saying that we're teeing up?
It's one of those ones that people are like, "Oh my god, the costumes look so bad," and like that's the only thing they have to say about it because they haven't actually watched it. They've just seen a picture of Azabi, and they're like, "Oh, I can see the guy's legs." I'm like, "Yeah, he looks awesome. He's a giant Ant-Man."
See, what I'm hearing is this is another season 2 First Doctor story that we'll be looking at. We're gonna speedrun this season before we get to a single other First Doctor story.
Fucking probably.
Including an unearthly child, which arguably we should have looked at long before this.
Yes. And it's not because I have all of season 2 on Blu-ray or anything. That couldn't possibly be the reason.
No, not at all.
Oh boy. Anyway,
I think we're done. I think we're done with Planet of Giants.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's give some scores out. For me, it's a 5.
I'm giving it a 6.
I think I'm going to give it a 4, actually.
Wow.
I like the bits I enjoyed in it. I enjoyed quite a lot, but certainly now after discussing it, there's just too many elements. And again, as a long-term fan of all of Doctor Who, most of Doctor Who, it's not even as innovative as other classic Doctor Who stories are. So again, it's certainly something that I can admire much more than truly enjoy it. So yeah, it's got some neat stuff, but it's just nowhere near as good as it could be. So yeah, I think I'm going to stick with a 4.
Cool. That's in the books. Another discussion done. Is it worth asking you, Sam, if you got anything you want to plug?
Nah, I can go on a Star Trek tangent that vaguely relates to Doctor Who I've been thinking of lately, though.
Go for it.
Alright, fuck it. So,
wait, hang on. Before you, I kind of heard in your voice there you were just sort of like leaning forward, ready to start like a big old story.
No, it's not gonna take that long. It's more just like it's an aspect of one of the characters that I think is like close enough to Doctor Who to be worth linking, but different enough to be funny to think about.
I'll cut you off if I feel like we're getting into Bionicle lore levels of Sam.
No. It's fine. So, Deep Space Nine. One of your main characters, her name is Jadzia Dax, and her species are called the Trill, and their whole deal is that they're humanoids, but some of them are bonded to symbionts, and those symbionts have many hosts over their lifetime. So as I was watching the show and hearing her talk about the past hosts of the symbionts, it struck me that it at least the way it's talked about and like used narratively, it's kind of like regeneration. So then it got me thinking, is like, okay, what would Doctor Who be like if regeneration worked like how the Trill worked? And basically, in season 1, you're introduced to a man named William Doctor, and that's really the only difference for the first season. Everything else is like he's the same, and then at the end of his tenure, when you switch over, he dies, and then he's like, that guy over there, Patrick, You come over here, you're going to surgically have this slug taken out of me and put into you, and you're going to become Patrick Doctor. And you will have the memories of previous, like, this is the Doctor symbiont, and you will take over this character now. Because, like,
God.
one of the things about Jadzia is that her previous host was called Curzon Dax, and he was like an old man who was a mentor to Ben Sisko, the captain, and now Dax is a young woman who's like serving under Sisko, and that's like, no, this is a weird way for us to have to navigate our new relationship with each other. So like it's often a lot more extreme than the Doctor regenerations.
Seems a bit
But
more
one of
morally.
them was a murderer, which was
Yeah, I was
just a
gonna
thing
say,
they have to deal with.
it sounds way more morally dicey than
It's
Time
not
Lord regeneration.
it's not really, because it's like
It's not. It sounds like you're just like effectively killing someone and using their body as a host for their
no,
previous
because
personality.
in the context of Trill culture, like you have to A, want to be a host, B, go through a very lengthy approval process. So like
Okay.
if you're becoming a host, you want it. You've gone
Yeah.
through enough
Yeah, it sounds
hoops and
regulated.
training that yeah, and like they don't just give a symbiont to anyone unless it's like a dire emergency.
Okay, so it's not a Futurama brain slug situation.
No, like it is a like because like Jadzia has her own personality. Jadzia was a person before getting the Dax symbiont, and then like it's kind of like Jadzia and Dax are two people who have become one person, and Dax just like retains the memories of all the other two people who have become one that came before.
Right. Cool.
I like that we're opening
So
up this segment at the end of the
it's
show.
basically just what if the Doctor was a slug that went from person to person?
I do like that we're opening up this segment at the end of the show because I think we're increasingly going to figure out people have nothing to plug here. So I thought opening
Yeah.
up. So what random thought would you like to get off your chest in this moment at the end of the episode?
I fucking hate the Borg Queen. She sucks and she's stupid and undermines what makes the Borg interesting. But we
Cool.
can
And
talk
with that
more about that next time.
Do you hate her more than Borg Picard?
No, Locutus is awesome. In the context of that, like, Best of Both Worlds is one of the best episodes of TNG.
I keep thinking that's a TNG movie thing, but I think you told me that it's not.
First Contact is the movie about the Borg that introduces the Borg Queen, and, like, Picard doesn't become a Borg again, but the fact that he did plays a big part in it.
Right.
But that is also stupid because that movie's bad. I don't like that movie. I don't like any of the TNG movies. They all suck.
Fair enough.
Well, thank you for
I have
listening
to
to this
watch one of
episode of.
those now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Two Treks Ravak. From one 3-part story of Doctor Who to another, next time we'll be checking out Utopia.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. Are we doing that
Oh,
separate?
all three of these episodes are so distinct that I feel like we have to look at them individually.
Okay, yeah, cool. Right. Good to check that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And with that in mind, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And I'm going to watch Star Trek Nemesis. And I'm not going to enjoy it.
Let us know next time how you felt.